Caste by Phil Wingfield, Part 2. I look often at the photos I took on that street in Patna. My photo of the 3 children standing outside their home is one of my favourites, and I think about them a lot. I think about all the things I didn't do. I didn't show them their photos. I didn't try to communicate with my rudimentary Hindi. I could have sat with them and shared some basic info, shot video and showed them before I left. Why did I not do these things? Well, too late now. I wonder how they are doing, even though little will have changed. They will have grown a little, had to source new clothes, or new to them anyway, and I wonder if they remember us. Was it so significant an occurrence? We were there for a short time, but came away with images to remember them by. From their point of view, we were there for maybe 20 minutes in all, and gone never to return. I like to think they would remember us, but maybe that's just conceit. However, we did seem to make their day. A friend of mine in Lucknow suggested that we could well have been the first tourists, maybe the first Westerners they had ever met, and quite probably the first time they had ever been photographed. It's a weird concept in this modern connected world of ours, but a distinct possibility. It would explain why the lad was so interested in us at the chai stall. And thinking about them and their lives, I have to consider that they don't have my perspective. Their life is the only one they have ever known. That is their norm. It was the same for their parents and grandparents, and sadly will be the same for their children and grandchildren. However, pragmatic acceptance of this situation does not make it right. Not by a very long shot. But, given that I can't fix it, I have to be content with the fact they seemed healthy, nourished, and above all, happy. Okay, it could have done with a scrub up, but by and large, I guess it could be worse. And, unfortunately, I guess right. In October 2019, some 8 months after we left India, swollen by the monsoon rains, the Ganges burst its banks and flooded vast swathes of Patna. The area where the bivouac community had been was all underwater. I wonder how they coped. How much warning did they get? Did they get any warning at all? Did they manage to save much? There were children, toddlers and babies there. It doesn't bear thinking about. I asked so many people, charities and organisations about the street dwellers and what help they were getting in this situation, but I got nothing back. No news, no reassurance, nothing. I scoured the Indian newspapers and news sites. There were rescues, videos of people being plucked from the upper stories of their houses or roofs, interviews with people whose houses and shops were flooded. There was even a student who went there just to do a photo shoot in a flooded street. Happily, she was torn apart by the media, but when it came to the street families and the homeless, there was absolutely nothing. Conspicuous by their absence from the news, photos and video clips. No one would talk about it. Very few seemed to care. So what of my photo now that none of it exists anymore? I can only hope they managed to move somewhere safe with as much as they could carry. Then at least it would be business as usual, as meagre as that was. But, as we know, fate wasn't done with these people. 5 months after the flood, along comes the pandemic. A global catastrophe that hit India's poor badly. India imposed a total lockdown with only a few hours' notice. Migrant workers, daily wage earners, beggars were totally and immediately cut off from their income, leaving people like the bivouac community with no means of support. It wasn't a matter of a flooded city district now, it was the entire country. Surely something would be done for these people. But again, precious little it seemed. Various initiatives were put in place, but in reality they were very difficult to access. Street people remained on the streets and struggled to survive. While the news was full of the desperate scrabble for oxygen and hospital beds, the public spaces turned into cremation grounds and the ever-rising death toll. The street people were absent from it all. They were dying too, but the oxygen and hospital beds were never an option for them. In essence, it was a catastrophe within a catastrophe, and very few were talking about it. Virtually no one I asked, for sure. I did get a response from the charity who brought me to Patna in the first place, but it wasn't all that encouraging. The response from Plan India was that families such as those in the bivouac community were born survivors, and they would get through it. Quite frankly, that was a cop-out. A cop-out from a charity organisation whose sole function was to aid the disadvantaged. And that got me thinking. The children I sponsored over the years, they were disadvantaged, but compared to the street kids in Patna, to street dwellers in general, they were royalty. They had homes, even if they lacked sanitation and utilities. They had an education and access to medical help, even if it was a bit of a hike. So why was this charity so offhand as regards these people who were much more in need than their current charges? The answer was simple. Caste. The caste system, an antiquated social stratification hierarchy locking people in at birth. You are born into a caste and you will die in that caste. There is no way up or out. The people on the streets are Dalits, formerly known as untouchables. They are literally the lowest of the low, so much so that they were viewed to be beneath the caste system, and at some point a lower level was created just for them. Shortly after independence, the caste system was ostensibly rendered obsolete. In 1950, Article 15 of the Indian Constitution outlawed discrimination on the basis of caste, along with race, religion, gender and birthplace. The same year, Article 17 outlawed untouchability, the notion that a person was able to pollute another's caste through physical contact. This should have made the Dalits equal, with exactly the same rights as any other Indian citizen. But in reality, caste discrimination is alive and well. Rights are still trampled underfoot, and many other archaic injustices are rife. I looked into this issue, and I wish I hadn't. The stories I found were truly horrifying, and the corruption endemic in the police force and the judicial system, plus a singular lack of empathy, ensures that the chances of justice, if you're a Dalit, are negligible. Living hand-to-mouth on the streets is, in many cases, the least of your worries. But don't take my word for it. Search for Dalit crime on the internet and see what you find. Try words like murder, torture and rape, but I have to warn you, you won't like what you find. The stories out there are unbelievably brutal, horrific and sickening. You will have a tough time taking it all in, and really, I wouldn't. In the context of this story, all I can do is hope that Plan India are right, and the bivouac family were born survivors and they did get through it. I really do hope they did. But either way, they are a blip on the face of the problem. The number of people on the streets of India varies wildly depending on the source. The official figure is around 1.8 million. Unofficial figures range as high as 100 million. All Dalits, many of them children, and many of those children are alone. And it's all down to caste. Caste is why they are on the streets. Caste is why that rich brat abused the kid in Patna. Caste is why they get so little help. Caste is why so few care. Caste is what makes them victims. Caste denies them their basic rights. And caste keeps them down. Where it would seem the majority are happy to have them. And as long as India remains a den of corruption, clinging to archaic dogma and lacking the political will to address either, nothing is going to change. Outcast was written and read by Phil Wingfield.